Welcome dear audience, students and scholars. Here I am Dr. Amjad Ali. In this video we are going to discuss about the small open economy under fixed exchange rates, the Mundell Fleming model. Dear scholars, now we turn to the second type of exchange rate system, that is fixed exchange rates. Under a fixed exchange rate, the central bank announces a value for the exchange rate and stands ready to buy and sell the domestic currency to keep the exchange rate at its announced level. In 1950s and in 1960s, most of the world's major economies, including that of the United States, operated within the Bretton Woods system, an international monetary system under which most governments agreed to fix their exchange rates. The world abandoned or abolished this system in the early 1970s, and most exchange rates were allowed to float or flexible. Yet fixed exchange rates are not merely of historical interest. More recently, China fixed the value of its currency against the US dollar, a policy that we will see was a source of some tension between the two countries. In this video we discuss how such system works, and we will examine the impact of economic policies on an economy with a fixed exchange rate. So let's discuss the question here, that how a fixed exchange rate system works. Under a system of fixed exchange rates, a central bank stands ready to buy or sell the domestic currency for foreign currencies at a predetermined price. For example, suppose the Fed announced that it was going to fix the exchange rate at 100 yen per dollar. It would then stand ready to give $1 in exchange for 100 yen, or to give 100 yen in exchange for $1. To carry out this policy, the Fed would need a reserve of dollars which it can print, and a reserve of yen which it must have purchased previously. Okay, while discussion about how a fixed exchange rate system works, a fixed exchange rates dedicates a country's monetary policy to the single goal of keeping the exchange rate at the announced level. In other words, the essence of a fixed exchange rate system is the commitment of the central bank to allow the money supply to adjust to whatever level will ensure that the equilibrium exchange rate in the market for the foreign currency exchange equal the announced exchange rate. Moreover, as long as the central bank stands ready to buy or sell foreign currency at the fixed exchange rate, the money supply adjusts automatically to the necessary level. To see how fixing the exchange rate determines the money supply, consider here an example. Suppose that the Fed announces that it will fix the exchange rate at 100 yen per dollar, but in the current equilibrium with the current money supply, the market exchange rate is 150 yen per dollar. The situation we see the first graphically here. How a fixed exchange rate governs the money supply. We have two panels. The first panel is the equilibrium exchange rate is greater than fixed exchange rate. We have here income output Y on x-axis, and we have exchange rate E on y-axis, and we have a vertical LM curve, LM1 static here, and we have a downward sloping IS static curve, and we know that the intersection of IS and LM will decide the equilibrium exchange rate and national income. So the equilibrium exchange rate initially exceeds the fixed exchange rate. Arbitrator will buy foreign currency in foreign exchange markets and sell it to the Fed for profit. This process automatically increases the money supply and shift the LM curve to the LM static 2. So here we have increased money supply, and we have the LM static curve to the shifting to the rightward, and which will lower the exchange rate from our equilibrium exchange rate to the fixed exchange rate. And we have a new equilibrium. That equilibrium is here now, with rise in income from Y1 to Y2. Okay, in the panel B, the equilibrium exchange rate is less than a fixed exchange rate. We have income output Y on x-axis, we have exchange rate E on y-axis, and we have a vertical LM static 1 curve, and we have a downward sloping IS curve, IS static, and we have here the equilibrium exchange rate, and we have a Y1 here. So the equilibrium exchange rate is initially below the fixed exchange rates. Arbitrator will buy dollars in foreign exchange markets and use them to buy currency from the Fed. This process automatically reduces the money supply, shifting the LM static curve to the leftward and raising the exchange rate. So our LM curve will shift to the leftward, that is LM static 2, and we have that fixed exchange rate, and we have a higher exchange rate, and we have a new equilibrium from this point to this point with a reduction in national income, that is Y2. Notice that there is a profit opportunity in panel A when an arbitrator could buy 300 yen in the foreign exchange market for the $2 and then sell the yen to the Fed for $3, making a $1 profit. When the Fed buys these yen from the arbitrator, the dollar it pays for them automatically increases the money supply. The rise in money supply shifted here the LM curve from LM1 static to LM2 static to the rightward, lowering the equilibrium exchange rate. In this way, the money supply continuously to rise until the equilibrium exchange rate falls to the announced exchange rate. Okay, on the other side, suppose when the Fed announces that it will fix the exchange rate at 100 yen per dollar, the equilibrium has a market exchange rate for 50 yen per dollar. This situation in the panel B shows that in this case an arbitrator could make a profit by buying 100 yen from the Fed for $1 and then selling this yen in marketplace for $2. When the Fed sells these yen, then the $1 will receive we can say that automatically reduces the money supply from LM1 static to LM2 static, and the fall in money supply shifted the LM curve to the leftward and raising the equilibrium interest rate from this point to this point, and the money supply continuously fall until the equilibrium exchange rates rises to the announced level. Here we have to understand that this exchange rate system fixes the nominal exchange rate. Whether it also fixes the real exchange rate depends on the time horizon under consideration. If prices are flexible as they are in the long run, then the real exchange rate can change even while the nominal exchange rate is fixed. Therefore, in the long run, a policy to fix the nominal exchange rate would not influence any real variable, including the real exchange rate. A fixed nominal exchange rate would influence only the money supply and the price level. Yet, in the short run described by the Mundell-Fleming model, prices are fixed. So, a fixed nominal exchange rate implies a fixed real exchange rate as well. So let's discuss some of the policies for the fixed exchange rate. The first is fiscal policy. Let's now examine how economic policies affects a small open economy with a fixed exchange rate. Suppose that the government stimulates domestic spending by increasing government purchases or by cutting taxes. This policy shifts the IS curve to the right, putting upward pressure on the market exchange rate. But because the central bank stands ready to trade foreign and domestic currency at the fixed exchange rate, arbitrageurs quickly respond to the rising exchange rate by selling foreign currency to the central bank, leading to an automatic monetary expansion. This rise in the money supply shifts the allosteric curve to the right. Thus, under a fixed exchange rate, a fiscal expansion raises aggregate income. So let's see a graphical presentation here of fiscal expansion under fixed exchange rate. We have income output Y on x-axis, we have exchange rate E on y-axis, we have a vertical LM static 1, and we have a downward sloping IS1 static. We know that here at the intersection of IS and LM will decide the equilibrium income and exchange rate. So here we are supposing that we have a fixed exchange rate. So a fiscal expansion shifts the IS curve to the rightward. So we have a shift in IS curve, IS1 static to IS2 static. Okay, to maintain the fixed exchange rate, the Fed must, or the central bank must, increase the money supply, thereby shifts the LM static to LM static 2 here, from LM1 static to LM2 static. With fixed exchange rate, here we have a rise in national income from Y1 to Y2. This reveals that under fixed exchange rate, fiscal expansion raises the national income from Y1 to Y2. Okay, let's discuss another policy, that is monetary policy. Imagine that a central bank operating with a fixed exchange rate tries to increase the money supply, for example, by buying bonds from the public. Here we have one of the main questions, that what would happen. The initial impact of this policy is to shift the allosteric curve to the right, lowering the exchange rate. But because the central bank is committed to trading foreign and domestic currency at a fixed exchange rate, arbitrageurs quickly respond to the falling exchange rate by selling the domestic currency to the central bank, causing the money supply and the allosteric curve to return to their initial position. Hence, monetary policy, as usually conducted, is influential under a fixed exchange rate. By agreeing to fix the exchange rate, the central bank gives up its control over the money supply. So let's see a graphical presentation for that. A monetary expansion under the fixed exchange rate. We have here income output y on x-axis, we have exchange rate E on y-axis, and we have a vertical LM static curve, and we have a downward sloping IS static, and we know that the intersection of IS and LM curve will decide the equilibrium exchange rate and national income. And here we have a fixed exchange rate at this point, and if the central bank tries to increase the money supply, for example by buying bonds from the public, it will put downward the pressure on the exchange rate. To maintain the fixed exchange rate, the money supply and the LM static curve must return. So by this point, if the central bank buys the bonds from the public, and to maintain the fixed exchange rate, the money supply and the LM static curve must return to the initial position. Hence, under fixed exchange rate, normal monetary policy is ineffectual. Okay, while talking about the income, we have income fixed at that fixed exchange rate. Okay, moving toward the further explanation about the monetary policy. A country with a fixed exchange rate can, however, conduct a type of monetary policy. It can decide to change the level at which the exchange rate is fixed. A reduction in the official value of the currency is called a devaluation, and an increase in its official value is called revaluation, sometimes the appreciation. In the Mundell-Fleming model, a devaluation shifts the LM static curve to the right. It acts like an increase in the money supply under a floating exchange rate. A devaluation thus expands net exports and raises aggregate income. Okay, let's discuss another economic policy that is okay. While talking about the revaluation, shifts the LM static curve to the left, reduces the net exports and lowers the aggregate income. Okay, let's discuss another policy, that is trade policy. Okay, suppose that government reduces imports by imposing an import quota or a tariff. This policy shifts the net export schedule to the right and thus shifts the IS static curve to the right. Okay, the shift in the IS static curve tends to raise the exchange rate. To keep the exchange rate at the fixed level, the money supply must rise, shifting the LM static curve to the right. Okay, the results of a trade restriction under a fixed exchange rate is very different from that under a floating exchange rate. In both cases, a trade restriction shifts the net exports schedule to the right, but only under a fixed exchange rate does a trade restriction increase net exports NX. The reason is that a trade restriction under a fixed exchange rate induces monetary policy expansion rather than an appreciation of the currency. The monetary expansion in turn raises aggregate income. Recall the accounting identity that is an x is equal to s minus I. When income rises, saving also rises, and this implies an increase in net exports. So let's see a graphical presentation for that. A trade restriction under fixed exchange rates, we have income output y on x-axis, we have exchange rate E on y-axis, we have a vertical LM static 1, and we have a downward sloping IS 1 static. Okay, we have a fixed exchange rate at this equilibrium point. We have that income, we have that fixed exchange rate with this income. So a trade restriction shifted the IS curve to the rightward. We have IS 2 static here. This will also provide induced shift in the LM curve, and we have a rightward shift in the LM curve, LM1 to LM1 static to LM2 static here. So this will raises the national income from Y1 to Y2. So under the trade restriction with fixed exchange rate, we have a rightward shift in IS curve, and rightward shift in LM curve will rise in national income from Y1 to Y2. Okay, here we have policy in the Mundell-Fleming model, a summary here. The Mundell-Fleming model shows that the effect of almost any economic policy on a small open economy depends on whether the exchange rate is floating or fixed. We have here some of the policies that the exchange rate regimes. Floating, here we have floating exchange rate and fixed exchange rate. We are going to see the impact of floating and fixed exchange rate on these variables. Here we have income, exchange rate, and net exports. Income, exchange rate, and net exports. And we have here three policies, that is fiscal. First one is fiscal expansion, second one is monetary expansion, and then we have the import restriction. Okay, when we are imposing the policy of floating exchange rate with fiscal expansion, we have no change in national income. We have a rise in exchange rate with a reduction in net exports, and while with the fiscal expansion in the presence of fixed exchange rate, we have a rise in national income with no change in exchange rate and net exports. While talking about the monetary expansion, we have a rise in income, a reduction in exchange rate will raise the net exports when we are talking about floating exchange rate. When we have the fixed exchange rate, there is no change in income, exchange rate, and net exports. While talking to the import restriction under floating exchange rate, we have no change in national income, but we have a rise in our exchange rate, but there is no change in our net exports. We have a rise in our national income when we have a fixed exchange rate, and we have no change in exchange rate with rise in net exports. So this table summarizes our analysis of the short-run effects of fiscal, monetary and trade policies on income, the exchange rate, and the trade balance. So here we have main question that what is the most striking is that all of the results are different under floating and fixed exchange rate. To be more specific, the Mundell-Fleming model shows that the power of monetary and fiscal policy to influence the aggregate income depends on the exchange rate regime. Either we are following the floating exchange rate or fixed exchange rate. Under floating exchange rates, only monetary policy can affect income. So see here, the monetary policy can affect income. The usual expansionary impact of fiscal policy is offset by a rise in the value of currency and a decrease in net exports. Under fixed exchange rate, we have only fiscal policy can affect the income. So here fiscal policy can affect the income, and we see that the monetary policy is lost its impact because money supply is detected to maintain the exchange rates at its announced level. So we can see that the Mundell-Fleming model shows the effect of almost all the economic policies on small open economies under different exchange rate regime, floating and fixed. So this is all about the small open economy under fixed exchange rate, the Mundell-Fleming model. So see you with another video. Ciao.